The sound of splintering wood woke Clara Whitmore at dawn, and she knew without looking that one of her Mustangs had kicked through another board in the tiny corral her late father had built 15 years ago. She pushed back the worn quilt and stepped onto the cold wooden floor of her small cabin, pulling a shawl around her shoulders as she moved to the window. The Montana Territory stretched out before her in the pale morning light of June 1878, endless grassland rolling toward distant mountains. In the cramped corral beside her barn, 3 wild Mustangs circled restlessly. The smallest one, a dappled gray mare she had named Silver, pawed at the ground near a freshly broken plank. Clara had captured the 3 horses over the past 2 months, drawn by their beauty and spirit as they roamed the open range near her property. She had always possessed a gift with horses, something her father had recognized before consumption took him last winter. But the corral was meant for 2 horses at most, and the Mustangs needed space to move, to run, to become the magnificent creatures she knew they could be. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, a simple cotton dress the color of cornflower, and braided her dark brown hair. At 22 years old, Clara had been managing the small ranch alone since her father's death. Her mother had passed when Clara was just a child, leaving father and daughter to forge a life together in this wild, beautiful territory. Now she was truly alone, with only the horses and the memory of better times to keep her company. Outside, the air carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. Clara approached the corral slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. The Mustangs had grown accustomed to her voice over the weeks, though they still maintained their wariness. The largest, a black stallion she called Midnight, watched her with intelligent dark eyes. Beside him stood Thunder, a chestnut gelding with a white blaze down his face. Silver, the youngest and most skittish, pressed against the far fence. "I know," Clara said softly, examining the broken board. "This place is not big enough for you. I wish I could give you more." She had the lumber stored in her barn, enough to build a proper corral that would give the Mustangs room to move. What she did not have was the strength to dig the post holes deep enough, to haul the heavy beams, to construct something sturdy enough to contain 3 wild horses. She had tried twice over the past month, managing to dig only 3 holes before her hands blistered, and her back ached so badly she could barely stand. Clara was repairing the broken board with twine and a spare plank when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She looked up to see a rider cresting the hill that overlooked her property. Even from a distance, she could tell he sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. As he drew closer, Clara stood and brushed the dust from her skirt. She recognized him as one of the cowboys from the Broken Creek Ranch, the sprawling cattle operation about 10 miles south. He had been in town a few times when she went for supplies, though they had never spoken. She remembered noticing him because he was always polite to the shopkeepers and never joined the other ranch hands when they got rowdy at the saloon. The cowboy reined in his horse a respectful distance from the corral. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. His eyes were the color of summer sky, startling in their brightness against his tanned face. Clara guessed he was perhaps 25 or 26 years old. "Morning, miss," he said, touching the brim of his worn hat. "I am sorry to disturb you. I was riding the fence line for Mr. Patterson and saw you had some beautiful horses here. Thought I would introduce myself. Name is James Thornton, but most folks call me Jamie." "Clara Whitmore," she replied, studying him carefully. She had learned to be cautious around strangers, especially men. A woman living alone was vulnerable in ways that kept her alert and wary. But there was something genuine in his expression, a warmth that seemed to extend beyond mere politeness. Jamie dismounted and walked slowly toward the corral, giving the Mustangs time to adjust to his presence. Midnight snorted and tossed his head but did not retreat. "Wild ones," Jamie observed. "You captured them yourself." "I did," Clara said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Found them running on the open range. They are too magnificent to leave to chance. A mustanger was talking in town about rounding up wild horses for the army, and I could not bear the thought of these three ending up that way. So you decided to gentle them yourself. It was not a question, but there was admiration in his tone. Jamie studied the cramped corral, then looked at the lumber stacked in the barn. You planning to build something bigger? Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I am trying. It is more difficult than I anticipated. I imagine it would be, doing it alone. Jamie turned to face her fully, and she was struck again by those blue eyes, so clear and direct. I could help if you would like. I have built my share of corrals and fences. Suspicion flickered through her. Why would you do that? He seemed to consider the question seriously. Because those horses need the space and you clearly care about them, and because it is the right thing to do. He paused, then added quietly, I know what it is like to try to manage everything alone. My mother raised me and my two sisters by herself after my father died. I watched her struggle with tasks that would have been easier with help. I learned that sometimes accepting help is not weakness, it is wisdom. Clara wanted to refuse. She had relied on no one but herself since her father died, and the independence had become a kind of armor. But she looked at the three horses in their too small space and thought about the long Montana winter ahead. They needed a proper corral before the snows came. I cannot pay you, she said finally. I am not asking for payment. Jamie glanced at the sun, gauging the time. I have the rest of today free. Let me at least make a start on it. Against her better judgment, Clara nodded. All right, thank you. They worked through the morning, Jamie digging post holes with a speed and efficiency that made Clara's previous attempts look pitiful. She helped where she could, holding posts steady while he tamped dirt around them, hauling boards from the barn. As they worked, they talked. Jamie told her about growing up in Texas, about following the cattle trails north with his uncle when he was 16. He had worked on ranches from the Texas Panhandle to Montana, learning the craft of being a cowboy, saving what money he could. His mother and sisters had moved to California 2 years ago to live near his aunt after his youngest sister married. Do you miss them? Clara asked, handing him another board. Every day, he admitted, but they are happy there and they have family around them. I send money when I can. Someday I hope to have my own place, maybe bring them back for visits. Clara found herself sharing her own story about her father teaching her to read and ride, about the quiet life they had built together. She spoke of her loneliness since his death, how the silence of the cabin sometimes felt oppressive. That is why I wanted the horses, she said. They fill the emptiness somehow. When I am with them, I feel less alone. Jamie looked at her with such understanding that her breath caught. I know exactly what you mean. By midday, they had set 8 posts in a wide rectangle that would give the Mustangs 4 times the space they currently had. Clara made sandwiches with bread she had baked 2 days ago and salted pork, and they sat in the shade of the barn to eat. The Mustangs had calmed, growing accustomed to Jamie's presence. Silver even approached the fence, nostrils flaring as she scented the air. She is curious about you, Clara observed. She is beautiful. Jamie stood slowly and moved to the fence, extending his hand palm down for the mare to smell. Silver stretched her neck, breath warm on his skin, then retreated quickly. She has spirit. They all do. That is why I wanted to save them. Jamie turned back to her. You have a good heart, Clara Whitmore. The way he said her name, with such simple sincerity, made something flutter in her chest. She looked away, suddenly flustered. We should get back to work if we want to finish those post holes before dark. They labored through the afternoon as the sun climbed high and hot overhead. Clara brought water from her well, and they drank gratefully, the cold liquid soothing their parched throats. Jamie had removed his shirt as the day grew warmer, working in his undershirt, and Clara tried not to notice the play of muscles beneath the thin fabric. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, all 16 posts stood firm and true, creating the skeleton of a corral large enough for the 3 Mustangs to move freely. Jamie stepped back, surveying their work with satisfaction. "It is a good start," he said. "The posts need to set overnight. I could come back tomorrow and help you attach the rails if you would like." Clara hesitated. She wanted to say yes, wanted to see him again with an intensity that surprised her. But accepting help once was different from expecting it repeatedly. "You must have work at the ranch." "I have a day off tomorrow," Jamie said. "Mr. Patterson is fair about giving us time, unless you would rather I did not come back." "No," Clara said quickly, then felt her cheeks warm at her eagerness. "I mean yes, please come back. I would appreciate the help." Jamie's smile transformed his face, lighting up his features with genuine pleasure. "Then I will see you tomorrow morning." He mounted his horse, a sturdy bay gelding, and touched his hat brim again. Clara watched him ride away until he disappeared over the hill, then turned back to look at the new corral posts standing tall and straight in the evening light. Something had shifted today, some fundamental change she could not quite name but felt deep in her bones. That night, Clara lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind replaying the day. She thought about Jamie's laugh when Silver had startled at a butterfly, about the way he listened when she spoke, giving her his full attention as if her words truly mattered. She thought about his hands, strong and capable, and about the kindness in his eyes. She had not thought much about romance since her father died. There had been too much work to do, too many responsibilities. And before that, the young men in town had seemed shallow and crude, interested only in her land or her appearance. But Jamie was different. He saw the horses and understood why they mattered. He saw her struggle and offered help without making her feel weak. Clara finally drifted to sleep as the moon rose full and bright outside her window, her dreams filled with blue eyes and gentle smiles. She woke before dawn, too restless to sleep. She fed the Mustangs their morning grain, cleaned the stalls in her small barn, and made coffee. When Jamie arrived just after sunrise, she had biscuits baking in her oven and was carrying a bucket of fresh water from the well. "You are an early riser," Jamie said, dismounting. "Force of habit, coffee? That would be wonderful." They sat on Clara's small porch, drinking coffee and eating warm biscuits with butter and honey. The morning was cool and fresh, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Clara learned that Jamie had a talent for woodworking, that he read books whenever he could get his hands on them, that his favorite time of day was dawn when the world felt new and full of possibility. "Mine too," Clara said softly. They began attaching the horizontal rails to the posts, working in comfortable harmony. Jamie showed Clara how to secure the boards properly, how to angle the nails for maximum strength. Her arms ached from the unfamiliar work, but she persisted, determined to contribute meaningfully. By noon, they had completed one full side of the corral. Clara made lunch while Jamie gave water to both horses. When she brought out plates of fried eggs and potatoes, she found him standing by the old corral, talking quietly to midnight. "He is warming up to you," she said, pleased to see the stallion standing calmly near the fence. "He knows I mean no harm." Jamie accepted the plate gratefully. "These horses, they sense things about people. They know you have a gentle spirit." "How do you know I do?" "Because they let you close." Wild horses do not trust easily. They only give their trust to those who deserve it. They ate in the shade, and Clara asked about the Broken Creek Ranch. Jamie described the vast herds of cattle, the other cowboys he worked with, the hard but satisfying work of ranch life. "Do you think you will stay there long?" she asked. "Until I save enough to buy my own place. I have my eye on some land east of here near the Yellowstone River. Good grazing, water access. Someday I will build a ranch there." He looked at her thoughtfully. "What about you? Will you stay here?" "This is my home," Clara said simply. "My parents are buried on that hill beyond the barn. Everything I love is here. The horses, yes, and the land and the memories." She paused, then added quietly, "Though it has been lonely since Papa died." Jamie reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, warm and strong. "You do not have to be lonely, Clara," her heart hammered in her chest. Jamie, we barely know each other. Then let me get to know you. Let me keep coming around if you will have me. Clara looked into his eyes and saw only honesty and hope. I would like that. They finished the second side of the corral by late afternoon, and Jamie promised to return the following day. As the week progressed, he came every morning, working on the corral before heading to his duties at the Broken Creek Ranch. The structure took shape under their combined efforts, strong and solid and built to last. With each day, Clara and Jamie grew closer. They shared stories and laughter, comfortable silences and meaningful glances. Jamie brought her wildflowers one morning, a bouquet of lupine and Indian paintbrush that she placed in a jar on her table. Clara baked him an apple pie, using the last of her preserved fruit from the previous fall. The Mustangs grew accustomed to his presence, and Silver began taking carrots from his hand. On the fifth day, as they were securing the final rails of the gate, a summer storm rolled in from the mountains. Dark clouds gathered rapidly, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance. We should get inside, Clara said, eyeing the approaching weather. They hurried to finish the gate latch just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the porch, the storm had broken in earnest, rain sheeting down in silvery curtains. Lightning split the sky, and thunder boomed so loud Clara felt it in her chest. They stood on the porch, breathless and laughing, watching the storm. The Mustangs huddled together in the old corral, but they seemed more curious than frightened. Jamie turned to Clara, his shirt damp with rain, his hair curling against his forehead. We did it, he said. The corral is finished. We did. Clara felt a surge of accomplishment mixed with something bittersweet. The project that had brought them together was complete. Would he still come around now that there was no work to be done? As if reading her thoughts, Jamie said, Clara, I need to tell you something. What is it? These past days, working here with you, they have been some of the happiest of my life. You are unlike anyone I have ever met. You are strong and kind, and you see beauty in wild things. I think about you when I am working, when I am falling asleep at night. I know it has only been a week, but I feel something real between us. Tell me you feel it too. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. I feel it. I have been afraid to admit it, even to myself, but I feel it. Jamie stepped closer, raising his hand to cup her cheek. May I kiss you? Yes, she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Clara did not want to. When his lips met hers, gentle and warm, she felt something inside her bloom like a flower opening to the sun. The kiss was sweet and tender, full of promise and possibility. When they drew apart, both were smiling. Stay for supper, Clara said. Stay until the storm passes. Jamie did stay, and they sat at her small table eating stew and bread, talking as the rain drummed on the roof and lightning illuminated the windows. Clara learned about Jamie's dreams for his own ranch, about the kind of life he wanted to build. He listened as she spoke about her hopes for the Mustangs, about possibly starting a breeding program for quality horses. You could do it, Jamie said with conviction. With the right setup and your skill with horses, you could build something special. It would require money, resources I do not have. Not yet, but things change. Opportunities come. He reached across the table and took her hand. And you do not have to do everything alone anymore. The storm cleared as evening fell, leaving the world fresh and clean. Jamie stood to leave, reluctant to go but knowing he must. At the door, he kissed Clara again, this time with more confidence, and she felt heat spread through her entire body. I will come back tomorrow, he promised. I will be here. After he left, Clara moved to the window and watched him ride away through the twilight. The new corral stood strong and ready, a testament to his kindness and their growing connection. Tomorrow she would move the Mustangs into their new home. Tonight she would lie in bed and remember the feeling of Jamie's lips on hers. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Clara was up early, eager to transfer the Mustangs to the new corral. She was also, though she was reluctant to admit it even to herself, eager to see Jamie again. He arrived just after breakfast, riding up with a wide smile. Ready to give those horses their new home, together they opened the gate between the old corral and the new one. The Mustangs hesitated at first, suspicious of the change, but Midnight ventured through first, his hooves quick on the ground. Once in the larger space, he broke into a trot, then a canter, circling the perimeter with his head high. Thunder and Silver followed, and soon all three were running, their joy evident in every powerful stride. Clara felt tears prick her eyes as she watched them. This was what she had wanted for them, this freedom within safety. She felt Jamie's arm come around her shoulders and she leaned into him, grateful for his presence. "They are magnificent," he said quietly. "Thank you for this, for helping me give this to them. Thank you for letting me be part of it." They stood together watching the horses run, and Clara felt a contentment she had not known since before her father died. The loneliness that had been her constant companion was fading, replaced by hope and happiness. Over the following weeks, Jamie became a regular presence at Clara's ranch. He would come by after his work was done, helping her with chores, spending time with the Mustangs, simply being there. They would sit on her porch in the evening, talking until the stars came out, and Jamie would always kiss her goodnight before riding back to the bunkhouse at Broken Creek Ranch. The Mustangs continued to gentle under Clara's patient care, and Jamie proved invaluable in their training. He had a way with horses that matched her own, a quiet confidence that put them at ease. By late July, all three horses would accept a halter and lead, though they were still months away from accepting a saddle. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jamie said, "I spoke with Mr. Patterson today. He is thinking about selling off some of his land, parcels to the east where the grazing is not as good for cattle." Clara turned to look at him. "The land you told me about near the Yellowstone?" "Yes, he said if I am serious about buying, he would give me a fair price and terms I could manage." Jamie took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am thinking about it, Clara, about finally starting to build the life I have always wanted." "You should do it," Clara said, though the thought of him being farther away made her chest ache. "It is your dream. It is part of my dream." He shifted to face her more fully. "But my dreams have changed recently. They include things I had not thought about before, a home, a family, someone to share everything with." Clara's heart began to race. "Jamie, I love you, Clara. I think I have loved you since that first morning when I saw you trying to fix that broken fence, so determined and stubborn. These past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. When I think about the future, you are in every picture. I know it is fast, but out here, life is uncertain. When you find something real, you hold on to it." "I love you too," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I have never felt this way about anyone. When you are not here, I am thinking about when I will see you again. When you are here, I feel complete." Jamie kissed her deeply and Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him close. When they broke apart, both were smiling through tears of joy. "Marry me," Jamie said. "Be my wife. We will build our life together, here on your land and on mine when I buy it. We will raise horses and cattle and make a good life. Say yes, Clara." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other as the stars began to appear overhead, making plans and dreaming aloud. They would marry in town at the small church, a simple ceremony with just a few friends as witnesses. Clara would keep her ranch, and they would work Jamie's land as well, building their operations slowly and carefully. The Mustangs would be the foundation of their breeding program. "We will need a bigger house eventually," Jamie said, kissing her temple. "When children come, you want children with you more than anything," he smiled. "I hope they have your determination and your kind heart, and your patience and your strength." They made plans late into the night, reluctant to be parted even for the hours until morning. When Jamie finally rode away, Clara stood on her porch watching until he was out of sight, her heart so full she thought it might burst. They were married 3 weeks later, on a warm August morning in the small town of Willow Creek. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, the lace yellowed with age but still beautiful. Jamie wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, his eyes bright with love and happiness. The ceremony was simple and short, witnessed by Mr. Patterson and his wife, the shopkeeper and his daughter, and a few of the cowboys from Broken Creek Ranch. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jamie kissed Clara with such tenderness that several of the ladies dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. They celebrated with a meal at the town's small restaurant, Clara and Jamie barely able to eat for the joy that bubbled up between them like a spring. That night, they returned to Clara's cabin, now their home together. Jamie carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the small room that suddenly felt like the center of the entire world. He took her face in his hands and kissed her slowly. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy," he promised. "You already do," Clara whispered, "just by being here, just by being you." They came together with gentle urgency, discovering each other in the soft lamplight, learning the landscape of shared intimacy. Clara had wondered if she would be nervous, but with Jamie she felt only rightness, only love. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, talking quietly until they fell asleep in each other's arms. The next months were a blur of hard work and deep happiness. Jamie gave notice at Broken Creek Ranch and began working Clara's land full-time. He negotiated the purchase of 100 acres from Mr. Patterson, using his savings and agreeing to a payment plan for the rest. They spent their days working with the Mustangs, improving Clara's property, and beginning to break ground on Jamie's new land. By October, Midnight had accepted a saddle and was progressing well under Jamie's training. Thunder was gentler by nature and took to the work easily. Silver remained the most challenging, but Clara's patient persistence was slowly winning the mare's trust. They decided to keep the three as their foundation stock rather than selling them, planning to breed them once the horses were fully mature. As autumn painted the Montana landscape in golds and crimsons, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Jamie one evening as they sat by the fire, his arm around her, both tired from a long day's work. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly. "Next spring, I think." Jamie went very still, then turned to look at her with wonder in his eyes. "Truly, truly." He gathered her close, burying his face in her hair. She felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying. "Clara, I am so happy, so very happy." They held each other, imagining the future that was growing between them. Jamie became even more attentive, taking on the heavier chores, insisting Clara rest more. She protested at first, but the fatigue of early pregnancy was real, and she learned to accept his help with grace. Winter came hard and fast that year, snow blowing in from the north in late November. Jamie and Clara worked to weatherproof the cabin, banking earth around the foundation, sealing cracks with mud and grass. They stored hay for the horses and laid in supplies for the long, cold months ahead. The Mustangs wintered well in their large corral, with access to the barn's shelter when the weather turned brutal. Clara spent hours in the barn with them, talking softly, brushing their thick winter coats, maintaining the trust they had built. Her belly grew slowly but steadily, and she would sometimes rest her hand on the small swell, marveling at the life within. One particularly cold January morning, Clara woke to find Jamie already up and dressed, banking the fire higher. "Stay in bed," he said when he saw her stirring. "I will bring you breakfast." "I can get up," she protested, but he shook his head. "You were uncomfortable all night. I felt you tossing and turning. Rest for a bit." He brought her porridge and coffee, sitting on the edge of the bed while she ate. Outside, the wind howled and snow swirled, but inside their small cabin was warm and safe. Clara looked at her husband, at the concern and love so evident in his face, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Jamie asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That I am lucky, that I love you, that I am glad you rode over that hill 9 months ago and offered to help with my corral," Jamie smiled. "That was the best decision I ever made, well, second best. The best was asking you to marry me." "I think asking me was pretty good, but marrying me was even better," Clara teased. "You are right. Marrying you was definitely the best decision." They spent the day inside, playing cards and reading aloud from the few books they owned. Jamie was working his way through a novel about sailing ships, something so far removed from their landlocked life that Clara found it fascinating. She was reading a book about horse breeding that Jamie had ordered for her from a catalog, studying bloodlines and characteristics. As winter slowly released its grip and spring began to show itself in longer days and melting snow, Clara's pregnancy became more evident. The baby was active now, kicking and rolling, and Jamie would spend evenings with his hand on her belly, his face full of wonder when he felt movement. "Strong," he would say. "This baby is strong." "Takes after both of us," Clara would reply with a smile. In late April, Clara went into labor on a morning when the apple tree beside the cabin was just beginning to bloom. Jamie rode hard to town to fetch the midwife, an older woman named Mrs. Kowalski, who had delivered half the babies in the county. Clara labored through the day and into the evening, Jamie holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. When their son finally entered the world just after sunset, his cry was loud and lusty. Mrs. Kowalski cleaned him up and placed him in Clara's arms, and she looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant with overwhelming love. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He is," Jamie agreed, his voice choked with emotion. He reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers immediately wrapped around his father's thumb. "Look at that grip. He will be a horseman for sure." They named him Thomas, after Clara's father. Little Tommy was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Clara recovered quickly from the birth, and within a few weeks was back to her usual routines, though now she carried Tommy in a sling against her chest as she worked. The Mustangs were fascinated by the baby. Silver in particular would come to the fence whenever Clara approached with Tommy, extending her nose to sniff the infant gently. Clara loved these moments, standing in the spring sunshine with her son in her arms and the horses she had saved surrounding them with gentle curiosity. Jamie proved to be a devoted father, walking Tommy around the property when he was fussy, talking to him constantly about the horses and the land and all the things they would do together. Clara would watch them from the cabin window, her heart full to bursting. That summer, they finally began to see profit from their work. Jamie sold 3 head of cattle he had been raising, and Clara sold Thunder to a rancher who needed a reliable working horse. It pained her to let the gelding go, but they needed the money and Thunder would have a good home. The proceeds allowed them to make a substantial payment on Jamie's land and buy lumber to begin building a proper house. They broke ground in August on a site Jamie had chosen carefully, with a view of the mountains and protection from the north wind. It would be a simple structure at first, 4 rooms with a real kitchen and 2 bedrooms, but they could add on as their family grew. Neighbors came to help with the heavy work of raising the frame, and by late September the house was enclosed and weathertight. Clara stood in the empty main room, Tommy on her hip, and tried to imagine the life they would build here. Jamie came up behind her, wrapping his arms around both of them. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it is wonderful. I think we are building something that will last." "For our children and our grandchildren," Jamie agreed. "This is just the beginning, Clara." They moved into the new house in early October, carrying their few possessions across the property to their new home. Clara set up the kitchen with real shelves and a better stove that Jamie had purchased. They arranged the furniture they had made and the few pieces Clara had from her parents. Tommy got his own small room, painted yellow to catch the morning sun. The first night in the new house, they lay in their new bed in their new bedroom, holding hands in the darkness. Through the window, Clara could see stars scattered across the vast Montana sky. She thought about that morning nearly 18 months ago when the sound of splintering wood had woken her. She had been alone then, struggling and lonely, trying to care for 3 wild horses in a corral too small to hold them. Now she had Jamie and Tommy and this house, and a future that stretched out bright and promising. All because a cowboy had ridden over the hill and offered to help. All because she had been brave enough to accept that help and open her heart to love. "Are you happy?" Jamie asked quietly. "More than I ever thought possible," Clara answered truthfully. "So am I." The years that followed were full and rich. Clara and Jamie worked their combined land, raising horses and cattle, building their operations slowly and steadily. The Mustangs produced strong, intelligent foals that developed excellent reputations in the territory. People began seeking out horses from the Thornton Ranch, knowing they would get animals with good temperament and solid training. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who could ride before he could properly walk. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and he possessed a natural affinity for horses that delighted both parents. When he was 3, Clara gave birth to twin girls named Sarah and Emma. 2 years after that, another son arrived whom they named Joseph. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Jamie added on 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They built a proper barn with stalls for a dozen horses and space for equipment and feed. The original corral that Jamie had built became part of a larger system of paddocks and pastures. Silver lived to be 23 years old, producing 9 foals over her lifetime. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep one spring night, Clara wept as she had not wept since her father died. They buried the mare on the hill where Clara's parents rested, marking the spot with stones. "She was the first," Clara said as they stood beside the grave. "The one who started everything." "She brought us together," Jamie agreed, his arm around Clara's waist. "I will always be grateful to her for that." Midnight lived even longer, siring countless foals and maintaining his proud bearing until the very end. Thunder's bloodline spread throughout the territory, known for producing reliable, even-tempered working horses. As their children grew, Clara and Jamie made sure each one learned the value of hard work, the importance of treating animals with kindness, and the strength that came from family. Tommy eventually took over much of the day-to-day operation of the ranch, while Sarah showed a talent for training that rivaled her mother's. Emma loved the cattle operation, and Joseph, the youngest, had dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Clara and Jamie never forgot those early days, the struggle and the hope, the moment when everything changed. On their 10th anniversary, Jamie surprised Clara by having a wooden sign made for the entrance to their property. It read, "Thornton Ranch, founded 1878, with a carved image of 3 running horses." "That was the year my life truly began," Jamie said as they stood admiring the sign. "The year I met you. The year I learned what it meant to build something that mattered." Clara leaned against him, still fitting perfectly against his side after all these years. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not ridden over that hill that morning?" "Every day," Jamie said quietly. "And every day I thank God that I did." As they walked back to the house, their children's laughter drifting from the barn where they were doing evening chores, Clara thought about the long journey from that cramped corral to this thriving ranch. It had not always been easy. There had been hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and financial worries, the everyday struggles of life on the frontier. But through it all, she and Jamie had faced everything together. They had built not just a ranch, but a life, a family, a legacy. And it had all started with 3 wild Mustangs in a corral too small to hold them, and a cowboy kind enough to build them a bigger one. On their 20th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Tommy was 21 now, engaged to a sweet girl from town. The twins were 16, beautiful and capable young women. Joseph was 14, studious and gentle. The house rang with laughter and conversation, 3 generations of family coming together. After dinner, as the sun set in a blaze of color, Clara and Jamie slipped away to the original corral now used for training young horses. They stood at the fence, hands clasped, watching a pair of yearlings play. "Do you remember?" Clara asked softly. "Every detail," Jamie replied. "The way you looked that morning, so determined. The sound of your voice when you talked to the horses. The moment I knew I was falling in love with you." "When was that?" "The second day, when you brought me coffee on the porch. You sat down beside me and started talking about your dreams for the horses, and your eyes lit up with such passion and hope. I thought, this is the woman I want to spend my life with." "I knew that day too," Clara admitted. "I tried not to. I told myself it was too fast, too risky. But my heart knew." Jamie turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Even at 47, he was still handsome, his face lined now with years of sun and wind, his hair showing silver at the temples. But his eyes were the same brilliant blue, full of the same love and devotion. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every moment, every struggle, every triumph, as long as it led me here to you, to this life we have built." "So would I," Clara whispered. He kissed her then, sweet and tender, and she felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt at 19 when he kissed her for the first time on her porch in the rain. Some things never changed. Some loves only grew stronger with time. As they walked back to the house, arms around each other, Clara looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She thought about the girl she had been, lonely and struggling, trying to save 3 wild horses against impossible odds. She thought about the woman she had become, surrounded by love and family, living a life richer than any dream. And she thought about the gift Jamie had given her that first week, working from dawn to dusk to build a corral big enough to hold 3 Mustangs and their wild spirits. He had built more than a corral that week. He had built a foundation for their entire life together, a structure strong enough to weather any storm, spacious enough to hold all the love and joy and family they would create. The sound of her grandchildren laughing drifted from the house, and Clara squeezed Jamie's hand. "Come on," she said. "Our family is waiting." "Our family," Jamie repeated with satisfaction. And together they walked toward the light spilling from the windows of the home they had built together, the life they had created, the love that had grown from a simple act of kindness into something vast and enduring. Inside, the party continued late into the night. Stories were told and retold, the family history passing to the younger generation. Tommy talked about taking over the ranch completely, about his plans to expand the breeding operation. Sarah announced that she had been offered a position training horses for the Army, a prestigious opportunity. Emma spoke of the young man she was courting, a cattle rancher's son from the next county. Joseph showed everyone his acceptance letter to a veterinary program in the East, his eyes shining with excitement. Clara and Jamie sat at the head of the table, watching their children and grandchildren, feeling the weight of years and the lightness of joy. This was what they had worked for, what they had built together. Not just a ranch or a business, but a legacy of love and hard work and family. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Clara found herself standing at the window looking out at the corrals silvered by moonlight. She could just make out the shapes of horses moving in the darkness, their forms graceful and free. Jamie came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything." "Nothing. How lucky I am, how grateful." "I am the lucky one," Jamie countered. "I could have ridden past your property that day, I could have minded my own business and kept going, but something told me to stop. Something told me you needed help." "I did need help, I needed you." "I just did not know it yet." Clara turned from the window to face her husband fully. In the lamplight, she could see the young cowboy he had been superimposed on the man he had become. The love between them had only deepened over the years, strengthened by shared struggle and triumph, by children raised and dreams realized. "I love you," she said, the words as important now as they had been the first time she spoke them 20 years ago. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Jamie replied, pulling her close. You are my everything, Clara, my heart, my home, my reason for waking up grateful every single day." They held each other in the quiet house, their children settled in their rooms or traveling home to their own places. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and starlit, the wind carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers and possibility. The ranch they had built together would continue long after they were gone. The horses they had bred would carry their bloodline forward through generations. But more than that, the love they had created would ripple outward through their children and grandchildren, a legacy more valuable than land or gold. As Clara and Jamie climbed the stairs to their bedroom, she thought once more about that dawn when splintering wood had woken her. She had been struggling alone, trying to care for 3 wild horses in a corral too small for their spirits. She had been drowning in loneliness and loss, not knowing that salvation was riding toward her over the hill. Jamie had seen her struggle and offered help. He had built her a bigger corral, yes, but he had done so much more than that. He had built her a future. He had given her love and partnership and a family. He had shown her that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom, that letting someone in did not mean losing yourself but finding yourself more completely. In their bedroom, Clara changed into her nightgown while Jamie extinguished the lamps. They climbed into bed together, fitting together as they had for 20 years, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, their legs tangled together. "Happy anniversary," Jamie murmured into her hair. "Happy anniversary," Clara replied. She listened to his breathing gradually slow and deepen as he fell asleep, felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. This was home. Not the walls around them or the land outside, but this man, this love, this life they had chosen together. Clara drifted towards sleep with a smile on her face, thinking about 3 wild Mustangs running free in a corral built by a cowboy's hands, built by love, built to last forever. Everything good in her life had flowed from that simple beginning, that moment of connection, that choice to accept help and open her heart. The ranch was quiet now, the night peaceful. In the corrals, horses dozed standing, their rest easy and untroubled. In the house, children and grandchildren slept, their dreams full of promise. And in the bedroom, 2 people who had found each other against all odds held each other close, their love a living thing that had grown from a seed planted 20 years ago into something magnificent. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara's last thought was one of gratitude. Gratitude for the struggles that had made her strong, for the horses that had taught her patience, for the father who had prepared her for life, and most of all, for the cowboy who had ridden into her life and stayed forever. The morning would bring new challenges and new joys, as all mornings did. There would be horses to train and children to guide, work to accomplish and dreams to chase. But whatever came, Clara and Jamie would face it together, as they had faced everything for 20 years, as they would face everything for all the years to come. Their love story had begun with 3 Mustangs in a tiny corral, and a cowboy kind enough to build them a bigger one overnight. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined that first morning when their eyes met, and something sparked to life between them. It had become a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. As the Montana night stretched on toward dawn, the ranch slept peacefully beneath the stars. The corrals stood strong and true, built to last. The horses rested easy, safe within their fences. The family slumbered, secure in the knowledge of love and belonging. And in the master bedroom of the house they had built together, Clara and Jamie Thornton held each other close, their hearts beating in rhythm, their souls intertwined, their love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky above them. This was their legacy. This was their triumph. This was the life they had built from nothing but hope and hard work and love, and it was more than enough. It was everything. The years continued to unfold with all the complexity and beauty that life brings. The ranch prospered under Tommy's management, expanding to include more acreage and more diversified operations. Sarah did take the position training horses for the army, gaining recognition throughout the territory for her skill. She eventually returned home to establish her own training facility on a corner of the family land, building a reputation that brought clients from as far away as California. Emma married her rancher's son in a beautiful ceremony held on the property, beneath the same apple tree where Clara had labored to bring Tommy into the world. The young couple built their own home on land that bordered the Thornton Ranch, creating a partnership between the two families that strengthened both operations. Joseph finished his veterinary training and returned to Montana, setting up practice in Willow Creek. He became the most sought-after veterinarian in 3 counties, known for his gentle way with animals and his extensive knowledge. He married a teacher from town, and they gave Clara and Jamie more grandchildren to love and spoil. As Clara and Jamie entered their 50s, they began to step back from the daily operations of the ranch, trusting their children to carry on what they had started. They took more time for themselves, for long rides across the property they had built together, for quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset, for visits with their growing number of grandchildren. On a warm June morning in 1898, 20 years after that first dawn when Jamie had ridden over the hill into Clara's life, they saddled 2 horses and rode out to the far pasture where a small herd of Mustangs grazed. These were the descendants of Midnight, Silver, and Thunder, wild spirit tempered with human kindness, strong and beautiful and free within their bounds. Clara and Jamie dismounted and sat on the grass, watching the horses graze and play. Clara was 52 now, her dark hair showing silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. Jamie at 56 had more silver than brown in his hair, and his hands showed the wear of decades of hard work. But to each other, they were as beautiful as they had been at 22 and 25. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked, a question that had been forming in her mind as they approached their 40th year. Jamie considered carefully before answering. "I regret the things beyond my control. The years I did not have with my father, the distance from my mother and sisters, but the things I chose, no, not a single one. Every choice I made that mattered led me to you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of that?" "I feel the same," Clara said softly. "Even the hard parts, the losses, they made me who I am. They brought me to the moment when you rode into my life." "Tell me," Jamie said, settling back on his elbows. "If you could go back to that morning, to the moment before you heard the fence breaking, knowing everything that would come after, would you change anything?" Clara thought about it seriously, looking back across the decades. "I would have said yes faster when you asked me to marry you. I would have worried less and trusted more. But the big things? No, I would not change those. Not even the struggles, the lean years. Especially not those. They taught us what we were made of. They showed us we could survive anything as long as we had each other." Jamie reached over and took her hand, his touch as thrilling now as it had been 40 years ago. "We have built a good life, Clara Thornton. We have built a beautiful life, Jamie Thornton." They sat in companionable silence, watching the horses, feeling the sun warm on their faces and the grass soft beneath them. This land, this ranch, this family, it was all a testament to love. Not the easy, romantic love of stories, but the real, enduring love that showed up every day and did the work. The love that built corrals and raised children and weathered storms. The love that lasted. As they rode back to the house that afternoon, Clara thought about the young woman she had been, alone and frightened despite her determination, trying to save 3 wild horses in a corral too small. She thought about the gift Jamie had given her, not just the corral but the partnership, the love, the life. The house came into view, larger now than that original cabin, but still home. Smoke rose from the chimney where someone was cooking dinner. Children's laughter carried on the breeze. The corrals and barns and outbuildings spread out like a small village, evidence of decades of work and growth. This was what they had built together. This was what had grown from that simple act of kindness, that offer of help, that choice to open her heart and let someone in. It was more than Clara had ever dreamed possible on that lonely morning 40 years ago. As they unsaddled their horses and turned them out into the pasture, Jamie pulled Clara into his arms. She went willingly, as she always had, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For letting me build you a bigger corral all those years ago, for giving me a chance. For choosing me, choosing us, choosing this life." Clara pulled back to look up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You gave me everything, Jamie, everything that matters. You built me more than a corral. You built me a life worth living." "We built it together," he corrected gently. "Everything we have, everything we are, we made it together." "Together," Clara agreed, and she kissed him there in the barn, surrounded by the smell of horses and hay and home. The years rolled on as years do, bringing changes and challenges, joys and sorrows. Clara and Jamie watched their children become grandparents themselves, the family tree spreading and growing with each generation. They celebrated victories and mourned losses, always together, always finding strength in each other. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire extended family gathered for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were nearly 60 people present, all connected by blood or marriage to Clara and Jamie, all part of the legacy they had created. The house overflowed with people and laughter, love and noise. At the culmination of the celebration, Tommy stood to make a speech. Now 51 himself, he had his father's steady presence and his mother's determination. He called for quiet and raised his glass. 50 years ago, my parents married in town with just a handful of witnesses. They had little money, few possessions, and no certainty about the future. What they did have was love and determination and a shared vision of the life they wanted to build. They took 3 wild Mustangs in a tiny corral and built from that beginning one of the most respected horse operations in Montana. But more than that, they built a family. They built a legacy of love and hard work and integrity. Everything good in my life, in all our lives, comes from the foundation they laid. So I ask you to raise your glasses to Clara and Jamie Thornton. May their love continue to inspire us. May their example guide us, and may we honor them by living with the same courage and devotion they have shown us all. The toast was echoed by 60 voices, and Clara and Jamie stood to acknowledge it, both with tears streaming down their faces. They had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and here was the fruit of all that labor. Here was the evidence that it had all been worth it. Later that night, after the guests had departed or settled into beds throughout the house and the property, Clara and Jamie walked out to the original corral. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the landscape they knew so well. The corral stood strong despite its decades, a testament to the skill with which it had been built. "This is where it all began," Clara said softly, running her hand along the top rail. "This is where you built me a bigger corral and changed my life forever." "This is where I found my home," Jamie replied, "where I found you and love and everything that matters." They stood together in the moonlight, 2 people who had spent 50 years learning each other, loving each other, building a life together. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies showing the wear of hard-lived years, but their love was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered so many seasons. "You remember what you said to me the night we married?" Clara asked. "I said many things that night," Jamie replied with a smile. "You said you would spend every day trying to make me happy." "And have I succeeded?" Clara turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "Beyond measure. You have given me a life so full of love and joy that my heart cannot contain it all. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend, my everything. You kept your promise, Jamie, every single day for 50 years. It was the easiest promise I ever made to keep," Jamie said, pulling her close. "Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They kissed under the Montana moon, beside the corral that had brought them together, surrounded by the legacy they had built. And in that moment, they were not two old people looking back on a life well lived. They were young again, feeling that first spark of connection, standing on the threshold of a grand adventure that would carry them through decades of love. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Clara and Jamie lived to see their grandchildren marry and have children of their own. They lived to see the ranch expand beyond anything they had imagined that first year. They lived to see the automobile come to Montana, to see the old century give way to the new, to witness changes that transformed the world around them. But through all the changes, some things remained constant. The land endured. The horses ran free within their bounds. The family gathered regularly, drawn together by bonds of love and shared history. And Clara and Jamie remained devoted to each other, their love a steady flame that never dimmed. When Jamie passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83, Clara held his hand as he drew his last breath. She whispered words of love into his ear, reminded him of that first morning when he had ridden over the hill, thanked him for every day of their 57 years together. The funeral was one of the largest the county had ever seen. Jamie had touched countless lives with his kindness, his integrity, his gentle strength. But no one grieved more deeply than Clara, who had lost not just her husband but her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. In the months that followed, Clara found comfort in her family and in the land. She still rode out most mornings, visiting the places she and Jamie had loved, talking to him as if he rode beside her. She found solace in the horses, in the continuation of the breeding program they had started together, in the knowledge that their legacy would endure. On what would have been their 58th anniversary, Clara rode out to the original corral at dawn. She was 81 now, her body frail but her spirit undiminished. She sat on the fence rail where she had sat so many times with Jamie, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We did it," she said aloud, speaking to Jamie though he was no longer there to answer. "We built something beautiful. We loved well. We created a family and a legacy that will continue long after I join you. Thank you for riding over that hill. Thank you for offering to build me a bigger corral. Thank you for loving me and letting me love you." It was the grandest adventure I could have ever hoped for. The wind whispered through the grass, and Clara chose to believe it carried Jamie's response, his continued love reaching across the veil that separated them. Clara lived for 2 more years after Jamie's passing, years filled with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She attended weddings and christenings, offered advice and wisdom, remained the matriarch of the sprawling family they had created together. When she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep like Jamie had, she was laid to rest beside him on the hill where her parents and Silver were buried. The entire county attended the funeral, paying respects to a woman who had embodied strength and grace, who had built an enduring legacy of love. The ranch continued under Tommy's stewardship and later under his children's care. The Thornton name became synonymous with quality horses throughout Montana and beyond. Each generation learned the story of Clara and Jamie, of 3 wild Mustangs in a tiny corral and the cowboy who built them a bigger one. The original corral still stood decades later, preserved as a memorial to where it all began. Visitors to the ranch were shown the structure, told the romantic story of 2 people who met and fell in love and built a life together against the rugged backdrop of the Montana Territory. But more than the physical corral, what truly endured was the love itself. It rippled outward through generations, inspiring countless others to believe in the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, the beauty of a life built on love. Clara and Jamie's story became legend, but it was rooted in truth, in real choices made by real people who chose love over fear, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. Their grave markers stood side by side on the hill, simple stones engraved with their names and dates. But the real monument to their love was everywhere. It was in the horses bearing their bloodlines, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren bearing their values, in the land they had worked and the home they had built, and the legacy that would continue as long as the Thornton name endured. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist rose from the grass and the sun painted the sky in pastels, visitors to the ranch reported seeing two figures riding side by side across the property, their forms indistinct but their love palpable. Whether this was ghost or imagination or simply the enduring power of a great love story, no one could say for certain. But everyone agreed on one thing. Clara and Jamie Thornton had lived a love story for the ages, a testament to what two people could build together when they opened their hearts and committed their lives to each other. It had started with 3 Mustangs in a tiny corral and a cowboy's simple offer of help. It had grown into something magnificent and enduring, a love that transcended death itself. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that the grandest adventures often begin with simple acts of kindness, that love can be found in unexpected places, and that a life built on devotion and partnership is the richest life of all. Clara and Jamie had proven that true love was not a fairy tale but a choice, made new each day, honored through action, strengthened by time. The Montana wind continued to blow across the grasslands, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers and possibility. The mountains stood eternal against the sky. The horses ran free within their bounds. And somewhere beyond sight, Clara and Jamie rode together still, their love undiminished by death, their story eternal, their legacy a gift to all who came after them. This was the story of 3 Mustangs in a tiny corral and the cowboy who built them a bigger one. But more than that, it was the story of 2 hearts that found each other across the vastness of the Montana territory and chose to build a life together. It was a story of struggle and triumph, of patience and passion, of the enduring power of love to transform lives and create legacies. It was, quite simply, a story of love, and it would be told for generations to come, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of finding their own grand adventure, their own true love, their own legacy built on the foundation of devotion and partnership and the simple, profound choice to build something beautiful together. The end.